1 week before getting married to Harvey, his first love got divorced. He brought her to me and wanted to call off the wedding. Winnie, I don't want to settle for less. No matter how much you imitate her, you can't compare to her. I left calmly, cut my long hair, and put on a motorcycle suit. Then I went back to my own battlefield. He sneered to his friends, who would like such a flamboyant woman? She's really not suitable for marriage. Until a photo suddenly circulated in our circle. On the motorcycle, a slender and fair hand was pressed against the chest of the most unruly young master in the Beijing circle, and his arm, full of tattoos and bulging veins, tightly hugged the woman's waist. The hormones seemed to spill out of the screen. Finally, Harvey called, "Winnie, who is he?" What he got in reply was another man's lazy voice, "Ex-boyfriend, let me introduce myself. I'm her legal husband. I was having the final fitting at the bridal shop. Half a month later was the day when I was supposed to marry Harvey. Although the wedding dress was custom-made, it was a bit tight around the chest and waist. When I went to the fitting room to adjust it, I suddenly heard voices outside that were becoming clearer and clearer. "Hey, do you know that Harvey's ex-girlfriend Lily got divorced and came back to China? I remember when she broke up with Harvey 3 years ago, Harvey was deeply hurt." Indeed. If Winnie hadn't suddenly shown up and accompanied him through that dark time, he probably wouldn't have gotten over it. Who's Winnie? She's the most unconventional little princess in the Beijing circle. I didn't expect that she really became well-behaved for Harvey's sake. However, now that Lily has suddenly come back, will they still be able to get married? The wedding invitations have already been sent out. If they can't get married, won't it become a joke in our circle? When their voices disappeared, I took off the ill-fitting wedding dress and called Harvey. It wasn't him who answered the phone, but in the midst of the noise, I heard his voice, like Dong Shi imitating Shi Shi, a Chinese idiom meaning an ugly woman trying to imitate a beauty, only to make herself look even uglier. Winnie can't even compare to Lily in the slightest. Someone then said, Winnie was previously generally recognized as hard to pursue and tame. Bro, you should be content. Harvey sneered, how hard to tame? In these 3 years, hasn't she been following me around like a dog? Finally, she managed to chase me until we're getting married. Bro, don't you like her? Harvey said in a cold voice, would you like a dog? Someone in the crowd continued to ask, then why are you going to marry her? Suddenly the air was silent. After a while, I heard Harvey's voice, it's quite interesting to play with a person like her who used to be so unconventional but has become well-behaved. I hung up the phone. Looking at my long, black, straight hair in the mirror and the tattoos on my arms and collarbone that had already been removed, I suddenly smiled. I've really had enough of pretending to be this good girl. Harvey didn't come home for a week. I put the wedding house on the intermediary platform. I bought every brick and tile in it. But I didn't want it anymore. After I finished dealing with that, I finally received a call from him asking me to meet. He organized the gathering but was the last one to arrive. When he came in, the delicate and pitiful Lily was following behind him. She looked 5 points similar to how I look now. He held her hand tightly, as if he was afraid that others would bully her, putting on a full protective posture. The air suddenly became quiet. Nobody dared to speak and they all looked at me. I didn't say anything. I just looked down at the red string on my wrist that was almost worn out and pursed my lips, until Harvey brought her to me and said, Winnie, I'm not going to marry you. I lifted my eyelids and looked at him calmly. You want to call off the wedding? He hugged Lily tightly and looked at her with a doting expression. Lily's back. I don't want to settle for less. No matter how much you imitate her, you can't compare to her. Do you understand? I don't love you. I nodded, He looked at me in disbelief, as if I shouldn't have such a calm reaction. You know, our parents arranged this for us. I loved Lily for 5 years and waited for her for 3 years. She was deeply hurt. I want to give her a home. I got a bit impatient and grabbed the bag beside me. Okay. Are you done? Harvey was stunned for a moment and then remained silent for a while before continuing. I'll handle my family side. You take care of your family side. We won't get married next week. Okay. I stood up and walked out. When I reached the door, Harvey suddenly called out, Winnie. I turned around. He was still standing there, but I saw that his other hand hanging beside his leg was clenched tightly. Anything else? He frowned. Don't you have anything to say to me? I thought about it. Actually, I really wanted to say that I envied him so much. Your first love can come back, but mine can't. In the end, I just said faintly, wish you a happy marriage. When I closed the door, I heard voices behind me. Really? Is that all Winnie's reaction? Harvey, didn't you say that she loved you to death? Why isn't she making a fuss at all? Shut up. It was Harvey's angry tone. I didn't look back. I should have understood earlier. No matter how similar Harvey was, he wasn't him. How could he be willing to leave me and look at others? After coming out, I went into a barber shop and cut off the long hair that I had kept for 3 years. When a neat short blue hair appeared, I seemed to be a bit more like myself again. Then, I got a string of letters tattooed on my wrist again, Jene recul jamais. It's French, meaning, I never back down. Finally, I came to a store that I hadn't entered for 3 years. Akun, help me push my motorcycle out. A muscular man with his shirt off came out of the store. He looked at me in surprise. His eyes turned red. It took him a while to come to his senses. Winnie? Yeah. It's me. A big boy who was over 1.8 meters tall looked at me left and right, a bit tongue-tied. Winnie, why are you here? I looked at the 2 motorcycles placed in the most conspicuous position. One was white and the other was black. I smiled. They're still here. Winnie, I've been cleaning these 2 motorcycles every day. They're as good as new. You can hit the road whenever you want. Where are you going? Do you want me to tell the guys? I shook my head. Bring it out. I want to go for a ride by myself. Okay. When I got on the motorcycle, a long-lost feeling swept over me. I hadn't ridden a motorcycle for a really long time. It seemed that as long as I didn't ride it, I could forget what happened that summer. I looked back at the other black Kawasaki and thought of that person. Akun followed my gaze and his eyes turned red. I'm also waiting for Charles. I've never touched the little black one that's been here with yours. I always thought that one day they would hit the road again together. Winnie, it's been 3 years. I've waited for you. Will we be able to wait for him? I was slightly stunned. So it's been 3 years already. They say that if you listen to the song, The Clock That Turns Backwards 1,000 Times, you can meet the person you want to see. I've listened to it all, but why hasn't Charles come back yet? I turned my head. My nose felt a bit sour, but I still comforted him softly. It's all just a lie. The dead can't come back to life. Then I started the motorcycle. Akun didn't know that I had already listened to it 10,000 times. I rushed all the way to the top of the mountain. Looking at the scenery below, I shouted, Charles, I've listened to you and tried to get married nicely. Why haven't you come back yet? Tears slid down my cheeks. Cheater. You clearly said you wanted to see me in a wedding dress. Look, my wedding dress. In the end, I can only show it to you, but it doesn't fit. I've been eating well and living a good life obediently. Why doesn't it still fit? Could you please hug me? The wind is so strong and I'm so tired. On the empty mountaintop, there was an endless sea of stars. The moon emitted a faint light, shining on the whole land. Everything became gentle. Behind me, there was a rustling sound. I suddenly turned around but there was no one there. It turned out that it was just the sound of insects. I pulled myself together and went down the mountain. Suddenly, I saw that the black Kawasaki was gone. Akun. I quickly got off the motorcycle and shouted towards the store, Where's the motorcycle? Who rode it away? There was a horn sound behind me. My heart was beating faster than ever. I don't know why, but tears had already welled up in my eyes. I gently stroked my chest and slowly turned around. Under the dim yellow streetlight, Charles was leaning against the motorcycle, dressed in black from head to toe. His eyes were as flamboyant, unruly, and wild as ever. He raised an eyebrow at me. My little Pepper, why are you still such a crybaby? Time seemed to go back to the first time I met him. My parents had a fight because I was disobedient and gave me a severe beating. I just told them not to torture each other and to get divorced earlier. What was wrong with that? I ran away and hid alone, crying. Halfway through crying, I heard a lazy and casual laugh. Whose little Pepper is hiding here crying? Charles put his hands behind his head, slowly got up and sat beside me, and handed me a tissue. It's too lonely to cry alone. Anyway, you don't know me, so I can be a quiet listener. That year, we were both 15 years old. I didn't tell him why I was crying. But he sat with me for the whole afternoon. Later, I got to know him. He was the school bully in the neighboring middle school. I heard that he was fierce in fights. He was also called a bastard, because he didn't have a father. Perhaps it was fate. We gradually got to know each other. He would take me to the top of the mountain to watch the stars. He introduced all his friends to me. All the care that I didn't receive at home, he gave to me. He also told me to be myself seriously. Because there were people who liked me just the way I was. He would show up in front of me every time I had a fight with my family, gently hug me, and let me vent my emotions to my heart's content. He would also avenge me and teach a lesson to those who spoke ill of me and said that I wasn't a good girl. He said, Winnie, no one can define whether a person is good or bad, and no one can judge you. You are who you are. I would also teach a lesson to those who called him a bastard. I would quietly stay by his side when he didn't want to talk and tell him that he wasn't alone. I said, Charles, you don't have to be a certain way. Your existence itself is meaningful. They all said that he, such a proud and cold person, only became gentle in front of me. It was like two people floating and sinking in the deep sea who finally found their own driftwood. Charles and I grew closer and closer. After graduating from high school, we fell in love. That night, a group of us rode our bikes to the top of the mountain, cheering and celebrating our coming of age. Then he quietly held my hand behind the group. He pulled me and started running. In the whole world, only the sounds of our breaths could be heard. Charles, does it seem like we're eloping like this? I still remember that summer. There was the fullest moon, the shiniest stars, the most beautiful cicada chirping, and the most sincere eyes of a teenager. Under the starry sky. We hugged and kissed. It seemed that this moment would last forever. Charles, you're finally back. I've missed you so much. My voice was trembling and my body was even shaking slightly. Why are you crying? Come here. Let me give you a hug. I rushed over with big steps. But what I saw was Kuan pushing a bike and coming over. Winnie, why are you crying? Didn't Charles say that his bike and yours would never be alone? I thought you had ridden yours away, so I pushed out Blackie and started it. Oh. It was just my illusion just now. I turned around and wiped away my tears. Some people say that you shouldn't meet someone too amazing when you're young, otherwise anyone you meet later will seem ordinary. I was just too obsessed. In the past 3 years, I hadn't faced the reality and was still praying for a real miracle to happen. When I went back, everyone was waiting for me. Seeing my blue hair and motorcycle suit, my mother was even angrier. Look at what you look like now. You don't look like a girl at all. No wonder Harvey doesn't want you. I stood by the door. Suddenly, I didn't want to go and I turned around to leave but my father stopped me. Where do you think you're going? Get in here. Call the Harvey family and apologize. Say that you won't marry anyone except Harvey. The wedding invitations have been sent out. There's no reason not to get married. Also, get rid of that messy color on your head. The Harvey family doesn't like flashy women. Do you understand? I slowly walked up to them. I smiled and said, why should I apologize? He wanted to give his ex-girlfriend a home. He was the one who wanted to break off the engagement. What's wrong with me helping him? My father stood up and slapped me in the face. Bastard. He's stupid. Can you be stupid too? Why don't you use your brain and think about it? Can the Harvey family let a divorced woman enter their family? My face was burning with pain. He continued, even if he has another woman outside, so what? In this circle, everyone just turns a blind eye. As long as it doesn't threaten your position as Mrs. Harvey, what's there for you to be angry about? I gently touched my face and pulled my lips. You two can do whatever you want, but I'm sorry, I can't. My father was so angry that his chest was heaving. He casually grabbed the cup on the table and threw it at me. That bastard is dead. It's been 3 years. You're still acting like this. Do you want to be a widow for him for the rest of your life? Winnie, I'll say it again. This engagement can't be broken off. Even if you die, you have to die in the Harvey family. 08 I didn't dodge the cup. It brushed past my face and still left a bloody scratch on my eyebrow. Suddenly, I remembered some past events. After Charles fell off the cliff in that race, I got severe depression and my wrists were full of marks from cutting myself. After being found and saved by the servants, my parents said I was being overly sentimental. A rich girl like me, who was blessed with so much, didn't know how lucky she was and got this kind of illness. They didn't understand me, nor did they care about me, because when I was very young, they each had their own little families outside. I didn't understand why they gave birth to me since they didn't love each other. Until the company was in crisis and they wanted me to marry into the Harvey family. I didn't want to, so they threw Harvey's photo at me and told me to stop pretending and just die if I really didn't want to live. I lowered my head and glanced at that photo. For a moment, I thought Charles had come back. He really looked so much like him. Especially those eyes. It was like a dying person grasping at a straw. I agreed to meet him. Even because they said the Harvey family didn't like flashy women, I obediently dyed my hair black. I wanted to stay by his side. Even just looking at this face would be enough for me. But unexpectedly, Harvey took the initiative to keep my contact information. He took the initiative first, so we got together. Later, I found out that he also regarded me as a substitute. We were just using each other, so when he asked me to keep my hair long, I did. When he said he liked me wearing long white cotton dresses, I wore them. When he said he didn't like me smoking, I quit. Even when he told me not to ride a motorcycle anymore, I listened to him. In other people's eyes, I, who used to be so unconventional, became obedient for him and loved him so much. Even Harvey thought so. What could I do? Without this face, I wouldn't have the courage to live at all. So even though he challenged my bottom line again and again, I accepted it. Because when I saw him, I remembered that Charles was still by my side and had never left. Until his first love came back. There was only someone else in his eyes. Only then did I wake up from this dream. No matter how similar he was, Harvey wasn't him. 09 Before going to bed, I unexpectedly received a call from Harvey. Your parents called my parents. I remembered that earlier in the evening, I posted the only motorcycle photo I had taken in 3 years on my WeChat moments. A friend left a comment below, so cool. Soon, under his comment, there was Harvey's comment. Who would like such a flashy woman? She's really not suitable for marriage. So I interrupted him, don't worry. You're not the only one who doesn't want to get married anymore. I just felt a bit sorry in my heart that I would never see those affectionate eyes when he looked at me again. Harvey was silent. Soon he laughed again with a mean tone. Winnie, if you can tolerate Lily, I can reluctantly marry you. However, don't expect me to love you, understand? Anyway, we're just dealing with our parents. You love me so much, and your family depends on mine. I can make your dream come true. I touched the string of English letters on my hand and slowly smiled. Harvey, if you really want to marry me, does Lily know? He didn't say anything, and only some hurried breathing sounds could be heard. Harvey, I know you regard me as Lily's substitute. What a coincidence. So am I. Do you know when you look the most like him? I narrowed my eyes, thinking of Charles's casual smile. It's when you don't speak and just look at me. Although you're just looking at someone else through me, I'm not sad at all. Facing this face, I'm already very happy. I softened my tone and said gently, so, even though you made me do a lot of things that I didn't want to do, I can't be angry with you. But just like you said, no matter how much I learn, I won't be like her. No matter how similar your faces are, you're not the same person. So, we're each other's substitutes. I don't know you, and I don't love you. This marriage, just no. Before I could finish speaking, Harvey suddenly hung up the phone. 10 I took 2 astaxanthin tablets. Only in my dreams could I see Charles. Go back to the 4 years when we loved each other the most. After the college entrance examination, we were together openly in front of all our friends. Do you understand? Holding hands with the person you like and walking on the road, drinking milk tea, and watching a movie. Even without saying a word, just looking at each other quietly, the air was sweet. Finally, we could ride our favorite motorcycles and gallop together in the world. Cohen said, Charles and Winnie are really the most compatible couple I've ever seen. Standing there, they're like an idle drama. I praised him for being good at talking and asked him to say more. Charles just put his hands in his pockets and leaned against the motorcycle, watching me play with his friends in a laid-back way. Later, we went to the same university. We started to form a motorcycle team and participated in competitions together. To be honest, he was really charming. His photos were posted on the confession wall every day. When he came out of class, there were always girls handing him love letters. He, afraid that I would be jealous, bribed the campus radio station and wrote love letters to me every day. His letters made my skin crawl. Then he hugged me tightly and laughed. I'll never get tired of writing. I'll write to you every day in the future. Many people thought that we didn't look like people who could have a long-lasting relationship, but unexpectedly, we were together for 4 years. Finally, my parents found out that I was in a relationship. That day, they called me home, flew into a rage, and told me to break up with this bastard immediately. I refused. My father was going to hit me with a stick. I raised my face, stubborn. You each have your own families. You haven't cared about me for so many years. Why do you suddenly come out to interfere in my life now? I'm really fed up with your hypocrisy. What am I in your eyes? A tool or a commodity? I'm your father. I gave you this life. You can't get rid of me in this lifetime. My mother, I've been too indulgent with you. You're so bold that you dare to say such things. Did that bastard teach you that? When the stick was about to hit me, Charles appeared and saved me. He pulled me up and protected me behind him. For so many years, you've never cared about her. She hasn't enjoyed your love, but you want her to repay you with kindness. Why? Why should she always obey you? This is the girl I love the most. You don't love her, but I do. You don't want her, but I do. That day, he held my hand and walked out of that home. We didn't say a word, but he hugged me all night. We agreed that we would get married after graduation. However, when we were about to graduate, I was suddenly followed for no reason. Sometimes, flower pots would fall down when I was walking on the road. Charles also became a bit distracted. One day, he suddenly asked me, if I'm not here one day, what will you do? Commit suicide for love. I wasn't joking. Before I was 15, I had no relatives, no friends, was rebellious, and didn't know the meaning of life. After meeting him, he was my salvation. I couldn't believe what I would do without Charles. Don't. He sighed. Even if I'm not here, you should live a good life, find someone who loves you, get married and have children. Do you hear me? I wrapped my arms tightly around his waist. What nonsense are you talking? In this lifetime, I'll only put on a wedding dress for you. I won't marry anyone else. Don't be so headstrong. I'm serious. Why are you being serious? Tell me, have you got someone else behind my back? His voice became hoarse as he gently stroked my hair. My princess, how would I dare? You definitely wouldn't dare. Otherwise, I'll just marry anyone randomly and make you suffer when you try to win me back. It was just angry talk. He chuckled softly. If one day you really get married and the groom isn't me, I'll come and steal you away at the wedding. Charles said that he would win the race for me, use the trophy and a ring to propose to me passionately in front of everyone. However, I never expected that he would never come back from that race. The scene in my dream was replaced by a misty forest. All I could remember were the deafening cheers, the sweltering summer that seemed to be smoking, and the news on the big screen that he had fallen off the cliff. In the sky full of flames, at that moment, there was no sound in my ears. 11. Charles. I woke up with a start and my back was already soaked with sweat. My phone rang. It was Akun's call. Winnie, there's a race on the mountain road this afternoon. Everyone will be there. Are you coming? Yes, I'll come. It wasn't my home ground, but I thought that I should always look forward anyway. This race is just a small one. There's an international race the day after tomorrow. Do you want to go? Huang Mao and the others have already gone there first. I leaned against the motorcycle and lit a cigarette. I'll go. I also need to practice and participate in the race too. I heard that many famous motorcycle riders will be there. Especially there's a dark horse from abroad who performs extremely well, but unfortunately, he never takes off his helmet, and no one knows what he looks like. If I could meet him, I'd ask for his autograph. I exhaled a puff of smoke and mocked him. Look at you. Next time, I'll win a trophy for you. Akun's eyes turned red again. Winnie, I'm really happy to see you like this. I patted him on the shoulder. After taking the last puff of the cigarette, I turned around and saw Harvey. Our eyes met and I clearly noticed that his eyes brightened when he looked at me. Winnie? I didn't plan to pay attention to him. I stamped out the cigarette but he grabbed my wrist. Let's talk. He stood in front of me, blocking the sun. Against the light, all I could see was his shadow. I looked at him quietly. Such a similar face. What a pity that he wasn't Charles. I was used as a substitute. Should I be happy? Winnie, do you have any conscience? His eyes were filled with anger. No wonder every time you looked at me, it seemed like you'd regained something you'd lost. No wonder you often stared at me in a daze, with red eyes and in tears. I even thought you really loved me. I felt sorry for you and agreed to the proposal of our two families' alliance. I think I was such an idiot before. I listened quietly until he finished speaking and then I said, Harvey, didn't you also use me as a substitute? Your first love is back. You don't have to use me to quench your thirst for love anymore. The substitute game was over. He took a step closer to me. I felt that he was going to crush my shoulder in the next second, so I automatically took a few steps back. Even if I was a substitute, didn't you become well-behaved for me? Would you have become well-behaved for him? After thinking for a while, I told him very seriously, no. I just thought that if I really got married, he would fulfill his promise and come to steal me away at the wedding. It was also the last obsession I left for myself. Have you never liked me at all? I looked up and looked at him calmly. You don't like me, and I don't like you. Isn't it fair? He paused, his brows furrowing tightly. Of course it's not fair. Winnie, you're just like a dog by my side. There are still 6 days until the wedding. You'll regret it. I won't regret it, I said. 12. I packed my luggage. I boarded the plane to Shanghai. There were still 4 days until the wedding date. My parents didn't agree to cancel the wedding, they still held a glimmer of hope that Harvey and I could make up. I lowered my head and touched the red string that I had worn for 7 years. After thinking about it, after watching the race and going back, I would completely break off with that family that was only united in appearance. I finally understood that some parents just don't love their children. I made peace with myself. Akun picked me up at the hotel. I heard that the dark horse rider is also staying here. Maybe we'll run into him. I smiled. Are you his little fan? Akun scratched his head. I just think that some of his skills are very similar to Charles's. My heart skipped a beat. Akun changed the topic. Winnie, let me take you in. The guys really miss you. They'll definitely be happy to see you come to watch their race. We went to the venue just before the race was about to start. On the racetrack, I indeed saw many familiar old faces. These people used to follow Charles around before. They all had not so good family backgrounds. It was Charles who pulled them out of the abyss and then gave them goals to pursue in life. There, in the black motorcycle suit, on the black motorcycle. Akun pointed at someone and said to me. It was a bit far away and actually, I couldn't see clearly. I looked over. Coincidentally, that person also turned his head while wearing a helmet. It was strange. I had a strong feeling. Suddenly, my hands started shaking, and my heart was pounding as if it was going to jump out of my throat. The race has started. Winnie. He was the first one to rush out and then left everyone else far behind. He rushed forward as if he didn't care about his life. Suddenly, I thought of what Charles had said to me before the rally race 3 years ago. He said that he would propose to me with the champion trophy. I stared blankly at the black figure galloping on the racetrack. My heart felt sour and swollen. 13. I thought that I needed an answer. Whether it was him or not, I wanted to see what he looked like under the helmet. I pulled Akun and rushed to the podium first. The dozens of minutes of waiting were more agonizing than any other time. It was like waiting for a ship at the airport. I knew the outcome but I still wasn't willing to give up. Until the big screen showed that he had crossed the finish line and won the championship. He had a foreign name. I watched as the camera on the big screen switched. He put his index finger and middle finger together and placed them on his lips, then threw a passionate kiss into the air. At that instant, I felt as if that kiss had landed on my face. I felt a wave of heat. He walked slowly to the backstage with the staff. I pulled some strings and managed to get in too. I walked up to him. I knew it was impolite, but I really wanted to see him. I asked him in English if he could take off his helmet. He didn't move but just stood in front of me. Even his figure was so similar. My heart was pounding uncontrollably. Finally, he spoke. Sorry. 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 At that moment, I felt a chill all around me. So, it wasn't him, right? I remembered that summer when Charles asked me what I would do if he wasn't around. I said I would die for love. But I didn't succeed in dying. I lowered my head, and my lips were trembling. Finally, I had no more hope. I turned around to leave. Suddenly, someone grabbed my wrist. I lowered my head and shifted my gaze from his well-defined fingers to his wrist with bulging veins. There was a red string on his wrist, the same as the one on my hand. It was already so worn out that it hardly looked like a string anymore. At that instant, my mind went blank. A teardrop fell on his hand. I watched as he took off his helmet with one hand. I saw the face that I had been longing for appear in front of me. Even the curve of his smile was exactly the same. Charles. It was my Charles. I missed you so much. However, I opened my mouth but couldn't make a sound. I finally understood what it was like to be too excited to speak. 3 years had passed. He seemed to have not changed and was still the person in my memory. But it also seemed that he had changed. Otherwise, why was my vision so blurry? Charles stood under the light. A halo coated his body with a golden glow. He stood against the light, and a smile emerged in his eyes. He curled his lips at me. My little Pepper, what? Don't you recognize me? I couldn't hold back anymore and threw myself into his arms, crying uncontrollably. Why did you just come back now? I heard that my little darling was going to get married, and the groom wasn't me. Of course I came back to steal you away at the wedding. He hugged me and kissed my hair. But I clearly heard a barely noticeable tremor and choking in his voice. 14 I hugged him tightly, letting the tears keep flowing down. I was so afraid that in the next second I would find that this was just a dream, an illusion. I was too scared. So, even if it was an illusion, let me wake up a little later. Sorry, I said I would propose to you with the champion trophy. I'm 3 years late. Do you blame me? I shook my head. I don't blame you. As long as you can come back, I don't want anything else. I just want you. At the award ceremony that day, Charles presented me with the trophy and a long overdue ring. I looked at him from the audience. The him now and the him from many years ago, their figures overlapped, the promise that was 3 years late. Finally, it had a happy ending. 15 That night, we turned the longing we had accumulated over the years into actions. We kept possessing each other again and again in sweat and tears. Even when we were exhausted, we didn't want to stop. Finally, in his arms, he slowly told me what had happened in these years. It was quite melodramatic. He and Harvey looked so similar because they were really brothers. Charles's mother was also the daughter of a wealthy family. Back then, she fell in love with Charles's father freely. However, Harvey's mother interfered, drugged his father, got pregnant, and took the position as his wife. Charles's mother couldn't tolerate such a thing and had no choice but to leave. But then she found out that she was pregnant. Later, Harvey's mother learned of their existence and secretly kept suppressing them. Gradually, it also made Charles's mother have the idea of revenge. So, she controlled Charles, made him go abroad to take over his uncle's business, and strike back at the Shun family. Charles was unwilling because of me, so Charles's mother targeted me. I suddenly remembered those unexplained followings and suddenly realized. Charles was scared and begged her not to touch me. My already paranoid mother set a condition that if she didn't touch me, Charles had to leave here. So a fake death was designed. Charles was taken abroad. In these 3 years, he only slept a few hours every day just so that he could see me earlier. There was a hint of choking in his voice. You don't know how much I've missed you. He told the stories that had happened to him in these years as if he were talking about other people's affairs. How he learned to manage the company from scratch, how he proved himself, and how he finally broke free from the control of his paranoid mother. He didn't dare to see me or contact me, all to protect me. He finished telling these in just dozens of minutes, but I knew how difficult these days had been for him. I knew how much effort it took for him to be able to stand in front of me again. I hugged him tightly. He also hugged me tightly, as if he wanted to blend me into his very bones and blood. Every time I missed you so much that I was almost going crazy, I would stab the tip of my pen hard on my wrist. I told myself that I had to hurry up and succeed quickly, otherwise my girl would not be able to wait. I promised her that I would win trophies for her on the racing track. I couldn't break my promise. I said that I would marry her. She's so silly that she would always wait for me. So, I studied like crazy and then gradually broke free from her control, and finally, I was able to stand in front of you. I knew that. Tears dried and then flowed again. It was as if all the repressed emotions of these years were being vented out. He gently stroked my face and placed a gentle kiss on my forehead. My little firecracker, will you marry me? 16. There were still 3 days before the wedding date. I took Charles to get the marriage certificate first. Watching the embossed seal stamped between our two photos, I smiled and then cried. Charles was in a flurry to wipe away my tears. I'm sorry. I'm late. I gently shook my head and wiped my face. As long as it's you in the end, it doesn't matter if it's a bit late. At the same time, a photo suddenly spread in our circle. On the motorcycle, a slender and fair hand was pressed against the chest of the hottest racing champion at present. And his arm, full of tattoos and bulging veins, hugged the woman's waist tightly. The hormones seemed to overflow from the screen. This was taken by Kuan and the others at the scene after the race that day. I don't know why the photo was spread out. Even people in our circle saw it. In the group, as soon as someone sent this photo, it sparked a heated discussion. Why does this woman look so much like Winnie? No way. Isn't Winnie always in long black straight hair and a ladylike dress? How did she change to having short blue hair, a suspender top, and hot pants? This seems to be what Winnie looked like a long time ago. The man in the photo looks a bit like Harvey. Damn, when did Harvey learn to ride motorcycles? It's not Harvey. It seems to be a racing driver from abroad. To be honest, these two really look good together. However, didn't Harvey tell us while drinking yesterday that Winnie would regret it before the wedding and come back to marry him? Yeah, so Harvey thought Winnie couldn't live without him. In the end, it turns out that she regarded him as a substitute. When I was trying on the wedding dress that Charles had customized long ago and had it shipped back by air in our wedding room, I received a call from Harvey. Winnie, who is he? I was arranging the skirt of the dress, and Charles answered the phone for me. He looked at me, lowered his head and smiled casually with a lazy voice. Ex-brother, let me introduce myself. I'm her legal husband. 17. I invited everyone to come out with Charles. On the mountain road, we rode our beloved motorcycles and rushed to the top of the mountain with everyone. Everyone was crying and laughing. He held my hand tightly behind me. It seemed that we had gone back to the summer when we were 18. Little firecracker, do you want to elope with me? My eyes were filled with tears. This time, I grasped his hand and ran away on a summer night. I stood on tiptoe and kissed the corner of his mouth. But he took the initiative instead, pinched my waist tightly and bent down to give me a long, passionate kiss. The familiar, soft, and crazy feelings couldn't compare to the surprise of getting something back after losing it. But it made up for our boiling, burning, romantic, broken, and unfinished youth. I don't know if we can be regarded as each other's salvation. I only know that in every pursuit, love is the greatest truth. 18. We had a great time in Kuan's shop until midnight and didn't fall asleep until it was almost dawn. When I woke up, everyone was lying around in the corner. I really liked the current atmosphere. I planned to go out and enjoy the mountain breeze. But unexpectedly, I saw Harvey. He was squatting decadently under a telegraph pole, with cigarette butts all over the ground at his feet and many empty wine bottles. I didn't know when he had come here or how long he had been here. Even less did I know what he wanted to do. I didn't want to see him. But he still blocked my way one step ahead. Winnie, let's get married. He took out the household register from his arms. I didn't know what trick he was playing. I took a step back and raised my hand. Harvey, I'm already married. Looking at the ring on my hand, he froze on the spot. You married that racing driver? I nodded. Suddenly, he got angry. How could you be so casual? How long have you known him? Why can he, while I... Halfway through his words, he paused, slowed down his tone and looked at me quietly. I haven't asked my family to cancel the wedding yet. 2 days later, we'll hold the wedding as scheduled, okay? I shook my head. The wedding won't be cancelled. I've simply changed the groom. For a moment, he was stunned on the spot. After a while, he smiled. If that racing driver knows that you regard him as a substitute, he'll definitely divorce you. Winnie, don't be silly. Marrying me is the best choice for you. Oh. Harvey didn't know that Charles was the one I had always loved. Don't worry. We won't get divorced. At this time, Charles's voice came from behind. He put his arms around my shoulders and placed a kiss on my lips. Because those who betray will go to hell. Looking at this face that was very similar to his, Harvey didn't say anything and walked away dejectedly. 2 days before the wedding, Charles and I were revising the invitation list. We only invited our closest friends and held a wedding that belonged to us. We were extremely busy but unexpectedly received a call from Lily. On the other end of the voice call, she was sobbing softly. Could you please meet Harvey? He drank so much that he got alcohol poisoning and was hospitalized. I was a bit confused. What did it have to do with me? Lily choked with sobs. I always thought that Harvey was really still waiting for me and really loved me. I thought that after I came back, he would firmly stand behind me. During that week, he did accompany me, but he kept looking at his phone all the time. I knew that he was waiting for your call, but you didn't give him even a single greeting. So he brought me to see you and said that he wanted to break off the engagement. In fact, he just wanted to irritate you, but you left calmly. You don't know how crazy he went after you left. I finally realized that in the substitute game, he had actually fallen for you. Knowing that you were with someone else, he kept drinking and kept chanting your name. I frowned and interrupted Lily. I don't want to hear these. I don't love him. Not even once did I have feelings for him. He doesn't love me either. He's just not reconciled to not having the initiative in this relationship. Then I hung up the phone. 21 days before the wedding, Charles's company made a high-profile acquisition of the Harvey family's company. Only then did they finally know. It turned out that the Harvey family had an illegitimate son outside. However, instead of fighting for the family property, he joined hands with his mother and delivered a fatal blow. Another hot topic that day was that Charles looked very, very similar to Harvey. Just at this time, Charles announced that he was going to marry his first love from his youth, and the wedding date was the next day. Everyone then realized that the racing driver was him. He was my first love who came back to life. My parents were very happy, thinking that they had found a new cash cow. But that day, I took Charles back home and told them that Winnie and the Winnie family were cutting off all relations. I had always been unable to be cruel before and was consuming myself internally because I thought that they had given me life. Moreover, I still had illusions about them. I expected their care, understanding, affirmation, and love. However, I couldn't choose to come into this world. But since I'm already here, I'm an independent individual. When I was repeatedly hurt by their emotions and tortured by illnesses, they just watched from a distance and let me drown in that deep sea. Not even once did they save me. Since I couldn't get it, then I don't want it anymore. In this world, not everyone can have family affection. Accepting the lack of a certain emotion is also a proposition of growth. When I left, my parents stood in front of me. For the first time, I saw panic on their faces, but it had nothing to do with me anymore. 21 on the wedding day, I was wearing the wedding dress that Charles had prepared. It fit me perfectly. I asked him, "How did you know my current size?" He pinched my face, because a certain little girl definitely didn't eat well when I wasn't around. He was wearing a neat suit, with less arrogance and wildness than when he was young, but more maturity and gentleness. He gently hugged me from behind. I looked at our reflections in the mirror and my eyes became a bit red. I had been waiting for this day for too long. Charles lifted my chin and kissed the corner of my eye. "My little firecracker, why are you still such a crybaby?" With just this one sentence, the tears that I had almost held back flowed out instantly. That day at the foot of the mountain, I had imagined that he would say this to me. But it was just an illusion. Now, the illusion had come true, and what was lost had been regained. God had been so kind to me. I raised my face and kissed his eyebrows in return, because I know that someone will wipe away my tears, someone will wait for me to watch the spring rain, the summer wind, the autumn fallen leaves, and the winter snow together. So even if I'm alone occasionally, I dare to move forward bravely because I'm certain that there will always be wild winds at the end of the cliff, and the person I love will be there waiting for me, saying hello and seeing me again.